In the fall of 1991, a stunned and confused nation watched a law professor charge a Supreme Court nominee with blatant sexual harassment on primetime television. Stunned because never before had there been this kind of media attention to sexual harassment. Confused because the lines can seem unclear and sexual harassment is inextricably aligned to perception. Shortly thereafter, the nightly news and national magazines carried stories of widespread sexual harassment and discrimination in the military. Those events brought to light something that millions of Americans already knew. Sexual harassment and retaliation is a pervasive, destructive social, legal, and ethical problem. And it is a problem which workers have not escaped. Sexual harassment, a form of sex discrimination, and retaliation for reporting it is one of the most persistent and destructive problems in the U.S. workplace. While potentially a problem for both sexes, the majority of sexual harassment is from men to women, and few working women have not experienced sexual harassment. Although sexual harassment is clearly illegal, it continues despite the high cost to the employee and the harassed individual. And despite the protections of the law, many who have been harassed do not bring complaints. Sex role stereotyping, distribution of power, and socialization are among the chief factors contributing to sexual harassment. Filing charges can be humiliating. Victims may feel their charges will be ignored or downplayed, or they may be accused of behavior that invited the offensive conduct. They may be ridiculed, face hostility or retaliation, poor work assignments, reduced hours, poor evaluations, or even the loss of a job. Still others don't know their rights, are confused about where the lines are drawn, or simply don't know what to do. What is clear is that sexual harassment and retaliation is against the law. Since 1964, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act has prohibited discrimination in employment conditions because of an individual's sex. In 1976, it was acknowledged that Title VII also prohibits sexual harassment as a form of sex discrimination. Unlawful hostile environment harassment may occur even where there has been no tangible job detriment, but where sexually harassing conduct is so severe or pervasive that it alters an employee's working conditions. Today, the Insider Exclusive goes behind the headlines in Justice in America, Crystal Starnes' story, to examine how Ed Olds of the Olds George law firm successfully sued and settled a sexual harassment and discrimination lawsuit for his client, Crystal Starnes, a former retired Butler County, Pennsylvania adult probation officer, against Thomas J. Doerr, the president judge on the Butler County Court of Common Pleas in Pennsylvania, and the Court of Common Pleas of Butler County. Earlier this year, the state court system agreed to pay Starnes $200,000 to settle the lawsuit. Here's Crystal to share some of her nightmare experience.
My name is Crystal Starnes. I started my career as a probation officer in Ohio, and then I went to Pittsburgh as a probation officer, and then eventually I met the president judge at a Christmas party. His name was Judge Thomas Doerr, and he eventually became my boss. He invited me into his chambers on a Friday night to discuss the job that I was interested in at Butler County. At the time when I went in there, he took me in and he'd showed me around a little bit of the courtroom, and then he eventually started becoming sexual with me. And I initially said no, but then he eventually, basically told me to get on the floor and had me lay flat on the ground. And I just froze at that time, and I just relented. He continued doing this off and on for about 5 years of having me perform sexual acts and him having sex with me in his office. I was in fear of losing my job. I loved my job. I went to school to become a probation officer, and I felt if I didn't do what he said, then he would fire me. In 2010, I wanted to end the relationship. I tried to distance myself from him. I was trying to end the personal aspect of it. He would continue to interfere in my job. I felt that he was involved with discriminating against me because one of the aspects of my job was to do field work, and they didn't let me do field work all of a sudden. And I was told that the judge felt it was too dangerous for me, but I was qualified to carry a firearm, and I had all the other training that every other probation officer had. I feel that he interfered in my job. I could have went out in the field to check on offenders to try to protect the community. When I filed the lawsuit, immediately after that, I got a lot of backlash from my coworkers, just being ignorant towards me, not talking to me. I had people tell me, why are you filing this? The worst thing that I went through after filing the lawsuit was, people victim blaming me on social media, calling me a whore, saying I wanted it, saying I was out for money. I want other women or men, whoever is being harassed, I want them to know that they can get control back of their life and not to be afraid, and that do the right thing, because in the end, they'll end up prevailing.
This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It is my great pleasure to introduce Ed Oles to the show. Welcome to the show, Ed.
Thank you very much, and it's my pleasure to be here.
Tell our audience a little bit about your law firm.
Well, I've been practicing for more than 40 years, and at some point I sort of swerved into dealing with civil rights, discrimination law, constitutional law, and I have pursued those areas for, say the last 30 years. Ms. George, Jamie George, joined the firm about 10 years ago, and she's continuing to do that kind of law. We do, like, as I say, constitutional law, First Amendment, equal protection, and of course, discrimination law. Those kind of cases.
Today we are here talking about one of your cases that you successfully settled. Your client was Crystal Starnes. Tell our audience who Crystal Starnes is. Crystal
Starnes is a young woman from Butler, Pennsylvania, which is a small, relatively small community north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania. She worked for the courts in Butler County, a probation officer for approximately 13, 14 years. And she came to me in, I would say, 2016. She came to me with complaints about discrimination. And then she told me a story about her relationship with a judge in Butler County, and that conversation spawned the lawsuit.
Let's talk about the facts of the case. What exactly happened to Crystal?
Crystal was a young woman, approximately 24, 25, when she met a judge in Butler County. She had aspired to be a probation officer in Butler County because that was her hometown. One evening, after she met with the judge invited her to his chambers, and there were sexual relations between her and the judge that night. It was late on a Friday night. In 2005. A judge involved was the president judge of Butler County, meaning that he was the highest judicial officer in the county, and he controlled hiring. And she got the job. Judge Doerr was his name, and the sexual relations continued for a period of time, several years. the lawsuit that we filed alleged that those relations were unwelcome to her, and eventually they stopped. But the lingering effects of those relations sort of, it was it gnawed at her, it burrowed into her. She was never ever comfortable with the job because, number one, the judge was her boss. She was fearful that he might affect her employment, and also it was, the emotional impact of having had those relations with him colored her life.
Ed, this case was filed in 2018. She was hired in 2005. Talk about some of the strategies and the challenges you had in this case in bringing it so late in the game.
In every state, including Pennsylvania, there's statute of limitations. The statute of limitations for this kind of activity is 2 years, and when Crystal did not come to me until 2016, and so the issue is how can you raise and pursue a claim that's so old? The case law is that a hostile work environment, which consists of unwanted sexual advances, hostile work environment is viewed by the courts as a single act. And even though particular activities of a hostile work environment can occur over a number of years, the claim is a single act. And so the theory of the case was that because of interaction between the judge and Ms. Starnes that occurred well after the sexual relations, those interactions became part of the original act and kept the ability to sue under the original act alive.
Please tell our audience what happened in this case.
Crystal and I took 18 months to decide whether to bring a case at all, because I knew, and I think she knew also, I knew that simply by bringing the case, there was going to be a profound impact on her life. The publicity, she lives in a small community, she has a family, and that there was going to be a profound effect on her life. When we finally did bring, and of course, we had numerous conversations about, do you want to do this? Do you want to, raise this issue? And eventually she decided that she did. So we filed a case in federal court in the Western District of Pennsylvania, making the allegations that supported the case. The Judge Doerr took the position that, based upon the doctrine of qualified immunity and peripherally the statute of limitations, the fact that there was a release signed by Ms. Starnes, took the position that she didn't have a case. And when a defendant asserts qualified immunity, that defendant can, even if the trial court says, well, we're going to move forward, that defendant can file an appeal. And Judge Doerr did file the appeal to the Third Circuit, which eventually rejected his arguments, putting us back in the district court where the case was resolved.
But you mentioned it had a profound effect on her life by filing this case. What was that profound effect? The
profound effect was that, as with everything in our society today, it caused a polarizing, it polarized the community such that there was social media coverage, there was press coverage, there was TV coverage, and of course, there were many people in the community that blamed Crystal. And there were vicious, violent, not violent, vicious references to her in social media accounts, in community websites. And it had, for a woman like Crystal, who basically tries to do the right thing, it was profoundly, I guess, it injured her further. And of course, she had continued to work after we filed the lawsuit, so that in the context of the people that she worked with, there were people that supported her, and there were people that resented her because she essentially had opened the curtain on the boss's conduct. And so it had profound emotional impact on her. It had profound physical impact on her. And eventually it got to the point where she couldn't work anymore. It was too hard for her to go in those courthouse doors every day and continue to work.
We have Crystal with us right now, so let's bring her on. It is my great pleasure to introduce Crystal Starnes to the show. Welcome to the show, Crystal.
Hi, thank you.
I want to thank you very much for being on this show. The experience that you went through was a nightmare. Tell our audience a little bit about what happened between you and the judge.
I met him at a Christmas party in 2004. And at the time, I was working in Allegheny County as a probation officer. And I told him, I had a desire to work in Butler County as a probation officer. And he had told me that if an opening ever opened up, he would give me a call. And he got my phone number, and then I gave him his phone number. And then after that, he had contacted me. And then eventually had me meet him at his chambers on a Friday night. And he said he was going to interview me at that time. And then I eventually went in, and it ended up turning sexual. And I felt like I was helpless at the time because nobody was in the building. I didn't know who would believe me, and he ended up, having sex with me on his chambers floors.
I think it's important to bring out that when you eventually became a probation officer for Butler County, that he was your boss, wasn't he?
Yes.
So the relationship continued, correct? You were in fear of losing your job if you didn't abide by what he wanted, correct?
Correct.
And what kind of interaction did you have with him throughout the period? I think it was, 4 years?
Yeah, it was through 2010 that it was pretty frequent.
Right. He would contact you how?
He would contact me by phone, or like by the office phone, or by my cell phone, or email, but it was mainly by phone that he would have contact.
You eventually wanted to end this relationship because it was interfering with your life. You were stressed out. How stressed out were you?
I was very stressed out. I now suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety from all the trauma I endured over the years. And I just remember, every day I'd go in to work, like I'd have anxiety inside, and I would feel like, what role am I going to play today? Am I going to be his personal slave, or am I going to be like the snitch of the office? Because he would use me to get information about what was going on in the probation office. And then he would also want me to go up and do sexual favors in his chambers. So I never knew what role I was going to play.
Let me ask you, you said he would use you for letting him know, snitch, what was going on in the probation office. What could be going on in the probation office that he needed to know?
He just would want to know, like what people were saying, or, basically if there was any bad mouthing of him going on, or, just basically the day-to-day operations, making sure that they were following through with what he would enforce. And because he was our boss. I mean, he did run the probation office. I mean, we did have mid-management, but he was ultimately the top person. He was actively involved in our office.
Well, obviously, for 5 years, you kept this to yourself, correct?
Yes, and the other thing is that he did was that this is why it was very upsetting for me, because eventually mid-management found out that I was, giving him information. So I ended up getting written up for it. And he's the one that was trying to get me to give him the information. So I get in trouble because the top boss is trying to get information from me, of what's going on. And I tell the top boss, because he's the top boss, he does the hiring and firing. But then mid-management starts retaliating on me because of my relationship with the judge.
Now, your relationship ended in 2010, approximately.
Yeah, I mean, the sexual stuff ended in 2010.
What made you decide in 2015, 2016 to seek legal action against him? What was the straw that broke the camel's back?
A lot of retaliation was going on at the time, and I was trying to get on call. I used to do on call in the past. It was called standby time, but it was basically on call work. And they were denying me, trying to say that I couldn't do it because I was in a different probation officer position at the time. They said that I wasn't allowed. However, I was part of the same union contract as every other probation officer. So that really upset me. And then they were excluding me from trainings that other officers was attending. They were excluding me from motivational interviewing training, which that was a big training at the time because they were wanting you to interview clients that way because that's the new era. And I used to do it, and then all of a sudden they said, oh, you don't need it anymore. But everybody else was advancing and doing this, and they were trying to hold me back from being able to be a better officer.
Tell our audience the retaliation or the adverse reaction you got from some of your fellow employees and the community.
After I filed the lawsuit, I had coworkers tell me that I shouldn't be doing this, that I'm not going to win it. People just trying to put me down for doing it and make me feel bad about, that I filed it. And, I also had, people putting negative comments about me on social media. I came out as a Jane Doe originally. My identity wasn't exposed, but people in the building knew it was me. But then once my identity got exposed, the local newspaper ended up taking my picture off of my personal Facebook page and put it on in their newspaper. And they tried to paint me like I was a criminal instead of a victim and trying to humiliate me. And then the victim blaming just started going on social media, and it still goes on to this day. There's still posts out there that people will comment on things about the case, and they'll still try to victim blame me.
What advice do you have to give to people who are being sexually harassed? Other women. Women are sexually harassed all the time. What should they do?
They should definitely stand up, tell somebody, go to a family member, go to an attorney, tell somebody you trust. You don't have to go to somebody within the organization. You can contact an outsider, file an EEOC complaint. There is help out there for them. They can, in my opinion, I feel that they can get their life back because I feel that he had control of my life, my finances, my well-being, and then my body. When I filed this lawsuit, I felt like I got some control back and, to get myself back, basically. And I feel that anybody that does this, you feel like you're going to get your life back.
What's your opinion of the legal system as a result of this case?
My opinion is that my case now set a precedent that no judge is immune to this type of behavior. This particular judge felt he was immune to everything. He even filed an appeal on the case thinking he was immune, and he wasn't. There were 4 judges that ruled in our favor throughout the whole process. And I feel that this case is very important for future attorneys and future litigants because anybody can use this for case law and the immunity aspect of it.
What do you think of the job Ed and his law firm did for you?
I think they did a fabulous job. Ed is phenomenal. He's an excellent attorney. He remained calm the entire time when I was all stressed out. I remember sending him lots of emails and I probably put him over the edge at times, but he never took it out on me. He was always very calm with me, and he was a very good attorney. He was very good speaker, very good writer, excellent writer. You know, I couldn't have asked for a better attorney.
One last question. If the judge was sitting in my chair right now, and you could say to him on camera what you think about him and what he did to you, what would you say?
I would just say that, why did you do this to me? I was a probation officer in Ohio. I was a probation officer in Allegheny County. I already had experience. Why would you take advantage of somebody that already had experience? Why? I had the degree. I had the experience. I worked very hard. I moved away to Ohio. I moved back to Pittsburgh, and I worked in Wilkinsburg. Why? Why? You didn't need to take advantage of me. I mean, I had education. I had experience. I worked very hard for everything that I did.
I understand your husband's here. We're going to bring him on right now. It's my great pleasure to introduce Bill Starnes to the show. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, by the way.
Appreciate your time.
Your wife and you have gone through one hell of a time.
Yes, we have. Yes.
And you, as a former government employee, a probation officer, senior probation officer, have seen the legal system on the other side now, haven't you?
Yes, we have.
I really admire what your wife did, Crystal, going up against the powers that be, because you knew this judge too, didn't you?
Yes,
What was the common talk in the probation department about this judge?
he was a very powerful person. He ran the ship. You didn't cross him.
He was everybody's boss in the probation department, correct?
Yes, yes. We were an at-will employee.
Yeah.
And from time to time, we were reminded of that.
And how would he remind you of that?
On several occasions, he came to staff meetings and basically said, if you don't like it here, I'll give you a good referral and you can leave.
Obviously, you and your wife have been together for about 10 years, correct?
Yes.
And you lived this experience with her. Can you tell our audience a little bit about the issues that you saw firsthand at home and the stress this was causing her?
It took a long time for her to want to deal with the problem. Taking on City Hall or a person as powerful as the president judge who could hire and fire you took a lot of time. You had uncertainty, getting into a system where we were concerned that the judge would be protected by his peers. In this matter, it turned out that he wasn't protected by his peers, thankfully. The judges that had the case assigned to them looked at the evidence, and I feel that they did what they needed to do. They affirmed that my wife did have a case. They listened to the evidence. And that's all really one could ask.
Since the case has been resolved, how has this affected you and your wife in looking at the legal system?
The stress is over to a point. My wife took on a system. They settled basically in her favor. She received a buyout or payout as a result of this. But it doesn't feel like justice was really completely served. My wife had to resign her position. She remained trying to be a probation officer for quite some time. But the stress that she endured trying to do this, she went to her doctor. They would take her off sick time from time to time, and she would return. And eventually it just got too much and she had to resign. I've had other people come to me and say, well, your wife's had to go, but the judge who did this basically remained untouched. He still holds his title. He still remains on the bench. The Supreme Court, I understand, removed his administrative responsibilities, but in January, he will retire as the president judge of Butler County, Pennsylvania.
You're on national TV right now? What do you have to say to the judge?
It's a shame that he didn't think about all the ramifications of what he did. It's affected my wife. It's affected our family. And I'm sure that it's affected his family.
I understand that we have two more close personal friends to you, Crystal, that are witness to what happened to you over the last 10, 15 years. We're going to bring them on right now. One of them is Corey, and the other one is Audra. Let's bring them on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Corey Kamer and Audra Bauer to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Corey, I understand you're Crystal's personal trainer.
Yes.
And you, Audra, are her hairdresser, beautician, if you will.
Yes.
For the last 10 years. Tell our audience, starting with you, Audra, what you witnessed Crystal go through during this whole terrible nightmare.
I noticed a drastic change in her personality as far as talking and how, like, what she was focused on. She was very troubled by things that were happening at her work. She kept saying that it was very stressful. When she first came to me, she was a very bubbly person and, easy. Not that she's not hard to talk to, but you could talk about anything to her. When this started to progress, it got more where she was more focused on work. She wanted to let loose and tell me things that were bothering her, but she couldn't. And as a hairdresser, and I feel like I'm part psychiatrist because I get told a lot of things that before anybody knows them. So she didn't really want to tell people, she knew she couldn't talk about it, but she wanted to talk about things.
Now, as the lawsuit progressed and it was eventually settled, did you see a change in her?
I saw relief. She definitely could breathe again. You could tell she wasn't on edge. She was very calm about things, and she felt good about what she had done and standing up for herself. And she wanted to do it to help others that maybe had been in the same situation that just was scared. So I did. I saw a very calm after the storm. I did.
And let's pick up on that, Corey. You're a personal trainer?
Yes.
Just like Audra here, you deal with your clients on a very personal level. You hear everything. Probably a part-time therapist too, right?
Yes. Yeah, I guess you could say.
How did you advise, if you will, Crystal while the lawsuit was pending and after it was settled?
So my advice to her was, since I'm from the fitness, and you need to release stress, and by not staying focused and not exercising and not relaxing your mind, you're going to get, bottled up with everything, and you're not going to be able to stay focused and clear-minded on where it's at, where you're going with it, and seeing the end. And so where my role came in was just trying to stay in touch with her as far as, are you working out throughout the day? Are you getting you time? Are you stepping back and focusing from a fitness standpoint? Are you getting at least a walk in a day to clear your mind? And so that's kind of where my advice kind of settled with her.
Her case and the fact that it was settled successfully is an example to all women that they should stand up for their rights, correct?
Correct.
What sort of admiration do you have for her and what she went through and the end result?
My admiration lies is that she truly stood up for herself, no matter how hard the situation was. That was very hard to become honest and be truthful and tell public on what is going on. I can't imagine how scared, the fear, what are people going to think? And I think that takes a really strong person to stand up and do that. So that's what I admire about her, is knowing the truth and stepping forward.
Audra, what do you have to say to other women out there who are going through the same kind of harassment, if you will, at their job, and what they should do about it, considering the fact that you know somebody personally, Crystal, who went through that?
I would advise them to really step back and realize the situation that they're in, that it's not right, that it's not normal. I think women think that it's just normal, or that's what they have to do to have their job. I just think sometimes people will push through just because they don't want to be exposed, and they think they're wrong. They think they're doing something wrong personally, and they're not. They're the victim, just like Crystal was a victim, and they need to stand up for what's right, and it's not right.
Okay, one last question to both of you. You're on national TV, Corey. What do you have to say to all women out there about Crystal's story?
You have one life to live. You have one vehicle, which is your body, to get you through this life. Do you want to live it under somebody else's slavery, or, telling you what to do? Do you want to have freedom in your life? Do you want to live with joy and peace and happiness, or do you want to live in some sort of a torture? It's your choice. And I say start to be true to yourself and stand up for yourself. And the people who care for you and are going to be there for you are going to stand by your side.
I agree with Corey. I agree. You have one life to live, and you make it the best you can. And it's supposed to be joyful for you, not for others. You're to do things for yourself and your family. And if it's in the end not in the benefit for them, then you need to step back and look and see what you can to change it, and that no person should be succumb to that.
I want to thank both of you for being on the show.
Thank you.
So Ed, let's, a lot of people watching these shows think, what is sexual discrimination? What is sexual harassment? How do I know whether I'm being harassed or discriminated against or retaliated against? How do you define those terms?
The key to Ms. Starnes' case was the notion that unwanted sexual advances constitute a hostile work environment. And a hostile work environment is actionable both under the Constitution by virtue of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment and by under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. A hostile work environment is as defined by the courts, is a severe, pervasive, regular environment where sexual matters, or for instance racial matters also, can taint the work condition such that a normal, reasonable person would be offended, and the particular plaintiff was affected subjectively, such that the terms and conditions of her employment changed. And so courts can go back and forth on, do you need 1 incident, 5 incidents, 20 incidents to constitute a hostile work environment? The answer is often dependent upon how serious the incidents are, to some extent, how frequently they are. There's no preset definition of that. So you take what you have, you take the facts that you have, you mold those facts into the cause of action, and you move forward knowing that the same facts in a particular fact situation, 2 different judges might decide that differently.
Oftentimes, Ed, when these conditions exist and an employee like Crystal wants to take legal action, they have to think about being retaliated against, losing their job. Maybe their source of income, if it's not there, is greatly going to affect their lifestyle, right? So what do you have to say to people who come into your office and say, I think I'm being harassed, I want to do something about it. What do you advise them?
Well, it is true that when a person speaks up and reveals this kind of activity, that person is going to face hostility and perhaps retaliation in the work environment. What I explain, how I address this with my clients is, number one, I tell them it's going to happen. Number two, I tell them that in the vast majority of instances, that they're going to not continue working with the employer. And I tell them, do you think, because work is, obviously, how are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to pay the rent? How are you going to put food on the table? And I tell them, you have to weigh the possibility of not working against the effect on your health of this activity. Is it so bad that your health is going to be affected? Is it so bad that you're afraid that you're going to be fired should you file this before you were fired? And so that's how we address that.
When people come into your office, Ed, with these types of major issues, how do you select the cases that you eventually end up representing?
I've always been on the underdog side, the side with people who lack power, and I judge their sincerity, how it affects them, and if I believe, in essence, if I believe them and they want to move forward, we're available to do the case.
I want to thank you for being on the show, and congratulations for the successful settlement of the case.
Thank you very much, and it's my pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.